This is the Canyon Talk On CF, and it's a brand new e-mountain bike for this year. Rather than just being a carbon copy of the existing Alloy model, the new Talk On CF represents a proper ground-up redesign. It certainly looks the business, but there's no doubt that this is a lot of bike. We've been putting the Talk On CF to the test over the past few weeks to find out if this is the ultimate self-shuttling DH machine. Now, the Canyon Talk On CF is the brand's biggest and burliest e-mountain bike. It's equipped with a 180mm travel fork, 175mm of rear travel, and a mixed wheel setup. It's built around a full carbon fibre frame, which is said to be 1.5 kilos lighter than the Alloy version. There's a huge boxy down tube which will fit a 720 or a 900 watt-hour battery. And that powers a Shimano EP8 motor, which is being clocked upwards in order to get the battery down as low as possible. Now, since the shock sits in the usual spot that you'd find a bottle cage, Canyon has engineered a custom solution with a proprietary bottle that sits inside the top tube. Now, it's not really possible to use the bottle while riding, but it is very secure and it's a great way to carry water on the bike rather than in your backpack. Geometry on the Canyon Talk On CF is also different to the Alloy version. It does get the same 63.5 degree head angle, but the reach is much longer. On our large size test bike, that comes in at 500mm. The seat tube angle is also way steeper. That comes in at 77.5 degrees. To help balance out the longer front end, Canyon has also increased the chainstay length. The rear center length comes in at 445mm on all 4 frame sizes. And there are 3 models available in the Canyon Talk On CF lineup, and prices will start at a bit over 10 grand for the CF8. Our test bike is the CF9, and current retail price on this is 12,399 Australian dollars. This bike comes with a Fox Factory Series 38 fork and a Float X2 shock, a Shimano XT group set, a Sun Duroc alloy wheel set, and Maxxis tyres with a Max Grip Assegai on the front and a Max Terra Minion DHR2 on the rear. Confirmed weight for our Canyon Talk On CF test bike is 24.02 kilos. Now, that's with the 720 watt-hour battery, which is around a kilo lighter than the 900 watt-hour version. Indeed, for the size and travel of this bike, the weight is pretty decent, though it is worth noting that Canyon has spec'd the Talk On CF with lightweight Exo Plus tyre casings. We reckon a double down or even a DH casing would be much more appropriate, at least for the rear tyre. Now, if you're after detailed specs and prices on the full lineup, we've put everything you need to know about the Talk On CF in the full review over at flowmountainbike.com. There's further information in there about sizing and suspension setup and how much range we were able to achieve out of the Talk On. If you're curious about whether you should choose the 720 or the 900 watt-hour battery, make sure you click the link in the video description below. Now, with 175mm of rear travel and geometry that's low and slack, there are no points for guessing what the Talk On is designed for, and indeed, when pointed downhill, this bike really comes into its own. The slack head angle, the tall stack, the low BB, and the long wheelbase all come together to make this bike a descender's dream. It has quality suspension and lots of it, and indeed, the steeper and rougher the terrain, the better the Talk On gets. Despite its overall heft, however, the mullet setup allows you to be much more precise when dropping into turns and navigating tighter sections of trail. The smaller rear wheel and the shorter chainstays go a long way to helping it turn in quicker and more easily, making this big bike surprisingly fun to ride on flowier trails. It jumps just fine too, feeling predictable and stable in the air, with the progressive suspension soaking up harsh landings with incredible composure. It's worth noting that some of the traits that make this bike such a great descender do have some drawbacks when climbing. It's fine spinning up the fire road, but when trying to climb single track, especially when things get steep and techy, does present a few challenges. The low BB, along with the fact that the suspension sits quite deep into its travel, means that pedal strike is an issue when you're trying to pick away at rocky and rooty climbs. Add in the tall stack, the short chainstays, and the 27.5 rear wheel, and your weight is pitched a fair way backwards. And while we found the Shimano EP8 motor to perform quite well, it does lack a little bit of punch on the really steep climbs compared to an equivalent Bosch motor. The Torque On is by no means a terrible climber, but there are more well-rounded e-bikes out there. Otherwise, we have few complaints about the spec and build quality of the Torque On CF9. There's decent protection around the motor casing, though we would like to see a full-length guard for the down tube. It is very wide, and we found it to be pretty susceptible to rock strikes. The only other issue we encountered came from a well-placed rock that knocked the charge port cover loose, which in turn switched the motor off. The plug is only held in place with a magnet, and while it was probably just bad luck, we would like to see a more secure mechanism for locking the plug in place. As for our overall verdict on the Canyon Torque On CF, well, this is a seriously big and burly e-bike that's an absolute riot to ride on steep and fast terrain. It handles tight trails surprisingly well thanks to its mullet setup, and it clocks in at a decent weight given it has so much travel. It is a lump to ride on flatter gradients though, and it is easy to get lost in all of that travel when trying to pump it through flowier single track. It struggles on technical climbs too, making it less suited to all-round riding. Indeed, for many Aussie riders, this will likely be too much bike. But if you're after an electric, self-shuttling DH machine and you've got steep double black diamond trails at your disposal, the Torque On is an awesome choice. Now, if you'd like to know more about our experience of testing this bike, make sure you click the link in the video description below to check out the full review of the Canyon Torque On CF. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you guys next time. Tooroo!